Okay, so the title of this video is What Some Do Not Know About Marriage. And I don't think some women even realize what they're getting themselves into. And they just kind of, don't really, really do their homework on what they're getting themselves into. And I know you're going to think that I'm talking about the person, um, how they look, like maybe how they look, but that's not what I'm talking about here. Um, when you get married, every problem that that person has, you begin to take on their problems. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And so some people don't realize what they're getting themselves into. So here's just one that could change your whole life. So if you're a woman and you've been doing really successful and you've been trying to build your credit, believe it or not, marriage can impact your credit score. And it could be a good thing or it could be a negative. And so when people say the vows for better or for worse, a lot of times they really don't know all of what the worst means. And for example, here, this article is by Jen Hansen. And I think it's very short and concise, and it really sums up some of the issues, or at least one major issue that can impact your credit score. And not only that, it can determine whether a person stays married or not. So marriage comes with a whole new set of commitments. But does saying I do to your betrothed also mean taking on their credit history? Does marriage mean you accept your partners in sickness, in health, and even in low credit score? And that is the question. And so the good news is that marriage does not impact your credit score positively or negatively, even if you change your surname. Credit reports are tied directly to your social security number, which does not change with marriage. So while you may be joining two lives together, each partner retains their separate credit history after they walk down the aisle. But does that mean it can't indirectly affect your credit score? Okay. These are the issues that could happen when people get married. And most times it does. And they don't realize how it can impact their life. So shopping for big ticket items like a new house means both of your individual score factors are in that loan application. So if one or both of you have a low credit score, it can bring down your qualifying amount and increase interest rates, or prevent you from receiving a loan entirely altogether, regardless of how high the other score may be. So before you start shopping, sit down and together and review each other's credit history. So a lot of times people will get in relationships and they assume that people are doing well, and they may not. They may tell you only what you want to hear. They may not tell you all the things about their life and how they have conducted their life or what has happened in their past. So when you are in a relationship, you want all honesty. And that's why I said, even with health history, because it does say in sickness and in health. And so if you're with someone and they decide they want to take on being a long-term partner, they have to be honest about their sexual history. And so that's why I talk about like HIV and AIDS and some of the other STIs and diseases and things like that, because people won't be honest. If it's one night stands, they're not going to be honest. Let's just be real here. If it's like a short relationship, if they really don't have long-term goals for you to be together, they're not going to tell you their sexual past or what they're involved in. And so also, they're not going to tell you it. A lot of times, some people won't tell you what their credit history is because they may not even be thinking about it, but it can impact how your relationship is going to end up. Because if, let's say, your credit score is a pretty good and the other parties is not good, could affect where you live. And also money sometimes can cause people to divorce. So it's not always about cheating. Sometimes it can be lying and or not being honest about finances. And so, like it says, when you shop for a new home, it can determine whether you receive a loan or they turn you down altogether. So before you start shopping, it says you have to sit down and talk to one another and you have to be honest about your credit history. So it can prevent surprises and gives you an opportunity to resolve any issues if one or both parties has less desirable credit. So considering deferring the purchase and seeking credit help, you might end up having to do certain things that will change your life. Everything's a life-changing event. And so improving your credit will net you better loan terms. So also when you purchase jointly, it goes on both of your credit. So if, let's say, a lot of times people will have disagreements in relationships because of money, finances. And like, say, if you all had a goal of saving money in a joint account, and then your husband goes out and he purchases something and he didn't talk with you about it. And it determines whether you're going to get that house or whether you're going to get that new car or whether you're going to, be able to pay the rest of the bills for that month. And so these are things that you have to be honest all around. And a lot of people don't have these type of relationships. Some do and some don't. Some women are struggling, in relationships because of the fact that they feel suspicious because the husband won't allow them to see their cell phone. And so that's a red flag right there. If he's got to hide his cell phone and, he's getting weird calls on the phone and he's acting suspicious about a cell phone, what other things do you not know about this partner? What other things could they be hiding or, holding back? And a lot of times they don't reveal themselves until you get into situations like this one here. So when you purchase jointly, it goes on both of your credit reports. So if one of you misses a payment on a shared loan, it appears on both of your records. So the spouse with the best credit does have an option to secure the loan in just his or her name. But here's the problem with this. Keep in mind that this means that one person, if you have the good credit, you shoulder all the burden. And so what could that mean? All the transactions, it's all on you, for better or for worse. And it'll appear on your credit report, on your report alone. And so merging assets. So couples often merge finances like bank accounts, credit cards, and since it's easier to maintain like that, but it could be problematic. Before you go down the road, remember that the health of the merged assets appear on both partners or both parties' credit history. So if you have a shared credit card and one of you decides to max it out, and this happens, I know people that this has happened to. And so if you skip out on the payments, both of your reports will reflect that. It suffers no matter what or who's responsible for it. And so if you live in a community property state, the debt accrued or acquired while you were a couple is viewed as a joint asset and subject to those rules. So it shows up on your credit history, even if something happens in that relationship and you don't stay together. So if you decide to merge, consider that keeping one credit account in just your name. So this gives you an option to trigger in an emergency and in a situation like divorce, which possibly could happen if you find out that this person has not been honest about a number of things. Um, that's just one avenue, but provides a foundation on which to build new credit so that if you split with that individual, or you separate or divorce, that you don't suffer entirely. So no matter what your credit score rating is, it's wise to review reports quarterly and file any disputes with each credit bureau. It's best to report errors in writing so you have a paper trail as reference. So learn more about the credit repair services and well as well as carrying on the conversation on platforms, social media and so on. And so these are some issues that I believe some people don't really realize that can impact your whole life, and it can also break you apart. Um, that's the reason why a lot of times people are like looking at these relationships, especially when people are famous. And divorce can be extremely expensive and costly. And some things like this right here, finances can trigger a divorce. I had two people, well, for example, there was one young lady that I knew. She was getting married, and she got married, and she said their marriage didn't last the year. So she ended up, I believe she had problems, and there was a host of problems. It wasn't just cheating, that was one of them. The husband was cheating, but it was bigger than that, even bigger than the cheating. The finances. Really what initially broke them apart is they were, people sometimes they have these big dreams of, having an expensive wedding. And sometimes the wedding, just the preparations of the wedding and what debt you're going to incur for renting a hall and for all of that, and then the rings. This divorce started, the whole argument started over how expensive the rings were. Because, some people want to have a ring with, a lot of diamonds or a big ring on their finger. And so they could not, come to terms of agreement. There were a lot of other little things that were underlying. And then once there was a split, all the bill of the payment of the rings, that person wanted to put it back on her. And so that's sort of like a small example. And so usually what happens if people get upset with you and you break up over finances, a lot of times I've heard too, some people will say they get mad at the other person and they'll take things like credit cards and max them out because they know that this is going to happen, that it'll go on your TRW, your credit report history, and it'll impact you, so that it'll make it hard not only to get a loan if you're trying to get a house. If you're not looking to get a house, it can impact your credit history where you can't even get into an apartment. You can't even get a car. And so a lot of people don't realize that when they're getting in relationships with people, that when you say for better or for worse, you better be ready because you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So you have to, what do they say? Cross all the T's and dot all the I's. You got to check that person out, their background, and know that they're not lying to you. And this is where people get into a lot of problems, because when you find out they're lying about one thing, guess what? Chances are they're lying about other things too, or they're hiding other things. If they're, some people figure, oh, well, I didn't lie, I just didn't tell them. That's the same thing. You're hiding. So there's distrust. There's no trust in the relationship. So this is a part of a couple being together. So when you say you're going to be together, it isn't just lovey, kissy, let's, this is my man, this is my woman type thing. You're taking on everything. You're taking on if this person has pre-existing health issues, maybe they don't even know about. You're taking on the fact that if they have good credit or bad credit. You're taking on the fact that you don't know if they have family members that dislike you, or you're going to get into some kind of family drama. You're taking on the fact that they possibly could have baby mama drama in their past, um, or a past relationship that is come back to haunt them. Um, there's lots of things that people are unaware of, and they're not really considering those things when they are looking for companionship. And so that could also be a driving factor as to why some people, if they act like they won't want to commit, commitment comes with, like it says, a lot of in sickness and in health, and also in low credit score. And then you have to air out all your dirty laundry to that other person. And some people are not good about doing that. And a lot of times they don't want to do it because they have to tell the truth about their sexual history, who they've had sex with, um, what types of diseases, had they ever caught a disease. And when you're getting involved with men who have been incarcerated, did they have sex in prison? What is their health history? Do they have pre-existing injuries or illnesses? The same vice versa, for the woman, what was her sexual history? What is her credit history? And a lot of times people don't realize what they're electing to get involved in. And it's not just about bubbles and roses and dresses and things like that. That's the upside, what you would say the pro. There's pros and cons and everything. So this would be the con. These are some of the cons that I'm talking about. The pros are, like, you see the people, they look happy. You get to pick your dress. You get to invite your friends. Everybody's smiling. They're excited, but you don't know what all you're going to encounter. And if you're not really prepared to be honest and forthright, then you already know that this marriage is not going to work. That's going to be what you call the deal breaker. Certain things. It's not always about cheating either. Sometimes you can cheat in other ways. You can cheat by lying and not telling them, you know, um, I wanted to buy this big TV, and so we can wait on getting a house. And a lot of times people don't realize that, if you have somebody who's dominating the situation and they're not thinking about the long-term effects of how this can impact your relationship, then that's what you elected to get involved with. And if they're not um, willing to accept the fact that they have to be honest, then you're getting involved with that as well. And so that may be the deciding factor as to whether you want to continue a relationship with someone if you can't trust them. And sometimes it takes a while before you can even go through the process of getting um, your divorce annulled or whatever. Sometimes what people will get into, whether they want to sign an additional contract before they even get married. And so some people find that to be, a problem, because it might be letting people off easy, or allowing them to kind of get out of a situation so they are not responsible for whatever expenses are incurred with that relationship, because they will be. You begin to accumulate things together just like you would by yourself. So I thought it was funny, because I heard this one lady, she was saying, what, I'm only dating people with a credit score of 700 and above. And at the time, I didn't really think that, that it was such a big deal. But now that I'm looking at all of this, the way the world is, and when you start to get older and you start to think of how, things such as a credit history can affect your whole life, then you start to see that, it isn't really that funny. It makes a lot of sense, but it also can make it harder for you to find people who are going to really be honest, and so that is the thing. Now, if the person comes already, they have a steady job, they've been to school, or they have a good career, or they have a nice, um, um, you know, track record, they pay their bills on time, they've got a decent credit history, and there's not that problem um, going in, you still don't know, even with that, okay, well, who's going to be the one that, you know, controls the finances out of the relationship, and who buys what and who doesn't. I've heard relationships sometimes will break up over somebody spending too much money at the store. So I just thought this was interesting because I don't think people realize that, you know, marriage is not a game. It's real serious business. And so if you're going to look for something like that, or even if you're not married to a person, I'm hearing that even when you're not married, there can be things that can impact your life, such as this. You cannot even be married to the person, just living in a long term relationship, and you decide you're getting a joint account. And if you find out that the person is not doing right by you, or they get mad at you and decide to max everything out, and then they leave it up to you to pay for it, it can really damage your credit history. Maybe they are mad, they don't even care anymore, So I just thought, this is something that should be kind of put out there, even, with these people that I hear, they talk about, you know, um, different individuals, but they're not telling you all of the details about why they're angry with certain people. And a lot of times people are angry with people because of things like this. Maybe they were in a relationship and the person took their credit cards and maxed them all out, and now it shows up on their TRW, their credit history, or it takes them forever to pay it off, or interest is accrued. And so they're still paying the interest. They haven't even begun to pay the principal value of what they owe. So I know that sounds pretty like a lot of, math jargon, but you're going to have to be like math informed, even in relationships, when it comes to, what you're going to be able to do together. If you're with a person, sometimes people won't get involved with you if you are not honest about your cell phone. Well, why are you hiding your cell phone? How come every time somebody calls, you run to the phone, you know, and you don't want me to look at who's calling? I've heard women say this a lot, that guys will do that they'll hide their cell phone because they don't want the woman to see the cell phone because they have other women calling. And so that can also impact your life. If you're not even married, it's already over before it starts. And so I noticed more recently that, like everybody doesn't, they're not famous. Everybody's not in the world is not famous, and they don't have gobs of money. But look at, like right now, I think Beyonce and Jay-Z, they were doing a tour, and they were having trouble selling tickets, so they were giving tickets away. I don't know if people saw that, but notice how there was so much drama in the marriage, and now they're trying to do all this couple stuff. And so I kind of feel like it's for show. It doesn't really show you what their lives are like behind closed doors, and we kind of got a glimpse of it. It was leaked, and we don't know what else is going to happen. I believe she's supposed to be having her fourth child. And so even having children can impact a relationship, because now you're taking on more mouths to feed. And so that can also add to your expenses. And so even if you split in a relationship with all the kids, who's going to take on the responsibility of raising the kids? And so, there's so many things, so many factors that people don't even really consider. And well, with that being said, I'm going to end this video, but this is out of Lexington Law. And it just talks about, like when you want to talk about credit repair services and credit history information, education credit information. And a lot of times, even in African-American community, there's a lot of topics about money and finance as well. This is one that is really a deciding factor of who you get involved with. And so a lot of times, some people won't even get involved with people if they got a bad, credit history. It doesn't matter what you look like, because they see that as a sign of irresponsibility. You mean to tell me you haven't gotten a TRW report? You don't even try to pay your bills? That in a way it does show the person's character, that they're not, they're never paying their bills. They're always waiting for you to do stuff. You're basically, if you take on that relationship or that person, then you're going to take on all of the drama that they have in terms of finances. So with that being said, I'm going to leave this video. So that has a lot to do with it as well. People don't really think about it, but that was just a little bit FYI. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for listening.